Welcome back to the Common Threads podcast. I'm your host, Kate Hall, and today we have a very special guest, my friend Riley Allen. Riley is currently serving in the U.S. Army and is married with one child and one on the way. Riley is also an active member of the LDS Church. So, thank you so much, Riley, for being here.
No problem. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
I'm so excited as well. It's going to be great. So I kind of just gave like a brief intro to you, but do you want to introduce yourself and you can include anything that I might have missed?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Riley Allen. I'm currently serving in the U.S. Army. I've been serving for a little over 4.5 years. I'm married to my beautiful wife, Sydney, and we have a beautiful baby boy named Bo and another one on the way that will be a daughter. We'll be naming Otilia. We're very excited about that. Expecting her this sometime this week, hopefully. Fingers
Wow.
crossed. Um, But yeah, that's about it. I've known Kate since high school, since
Yeah.
middle school, actually, since forever.
Yeah.
So
We go way
it's
back.
a big honor to be a part of this. So I'm super excited.
Well, thanks. I'm excited to hear your story. And yeah, it's been a while since we've seen each other. So I'm excited to get to know you again and go through some stuff. And yeah, it'll be great.
Heck yeah.
Um, so I wanted to start. You grew up in Southern Utah, which
Yeah.
politically speaking is pretty conservative.
Yep.
Um, I wanted to ask, were you raised more conservatively to kind of match what you were seeing, or was it a completely different experience for you?
So yes, so my household growing up, so I'm the youngest of eight. Big family, as members of the church are a lot of times. But my parents were very, very, very conservative growing up. I wouldn't say necessarily like far right conservative, but um, we were pretty conservative growing up. And so for as long as I can remember, all of my beliefs have been conservative, and up until around probably about a year or two ago, I considered myself a Republican and was essentially like hyper conservative, like everything, like no liberal views or anything like that. But once I got in high school and was being around more people, I started kind of getting my own beliefs. And then within the past like 2 years or so, like I said, is when I've really started to open up more and really be more open minded. Now I consider myself more libertarian or independent, and I don't think that anybody can have, at least my opinion is that nobody can have views specific to one side. That I I feel that everybody has a little bit of each side in them, you know?
Yeah, yeah, totally. No, I definitely sympathize with that as well. Um, do you feel like there was a specific time growing up where those beliefs started to kind of grow, and maybe there's some experiences there where you saw some things happening and you're like, oh, well, that really shaped how I view the world at that age.
Um, yeah, I can think of a few. So when I in middle school, before I started hanging out with the friend group that you were a part of in middle school and stuff like that. So like in eighth grade, I was what was known as an emo kid, going through my phase, which was pretty great. But that really opened up my views a lot more. I'd say like more Democrat or liberal type views, because a lot of those people are very much LGBTQ rights and like Black Lives Matter and stuff like that, and a lot of racial rights and those types of beliefs. And so it really started to open up my mind like that, where I still believed in those things, but I still considered myself Republican, which I think it's kind of funny that a lot of people think to have views like that is a liberal view and not like a conservative view. Whereas I feel like having views like LGBTQ rights are important and don't be racist should just be like human beliefs, regardless of your political party, you know? Like it's kind of funny. But around there in middle school, it kind of like started opening up to me a little bit. And then in high school, I was hanging out with some people who probably weren't like the best crowd, a little bit more of like redneck type of people, and they kind of were more on the racist side. And I started being like, hey, I don't think that what you're saying is necessarily right. And I remember there was one instance in high school where there was this one kid who some kid said a racial slur to Jack, and
Mm.
Jackson, rightfully so, you know, like put hands on him. And it's like the kid looked at me and he was like, what, you're not going to defend me? And I was like, no, like, don't get me wrong. Like, you have your First Amendment right to say things, but I'm also going to support him and giving you what you deserve because you're being a jerk.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Did those experiences clash with like anything you were experiencing like at home with your parents or like religiously or anything like that? Like was there some
Um,
dissonance kind of going on?
Not necessarily. Like, there was some things where I would bring up, like, for example, my dad for a long time was very much like anti-LGBTQ. And when I was in
Mhm.
high school, I started realizing, like, like, I might not agree with that lifestyle, but they should be allowed to love who they love. Like, who am I to say that they don't have the right to love someone? And my father was kind of against that for a while. Now he's a lot more okay with it, but when I was in high school, it was very much a disconnect between me and him.
Hmm. How did you I'm trying to figure out the way to like word this question, but how did you kind of develop those thoughts that were very different from other people in your lives? And different than like a lot of the community is in Southern Utah? Like how did you were there like certain feelings or I don't know, I'm just like curious like how you kind of went down a slightly different path, you know?
Yeah. Believe it or not, I think it was more so in my study of the gospel of Jesus Christ through the LDS
Hmm.
church and preparing for my mission and stuff, because it got me to the point where, yes, I still consider myself like more conservative than liberal, but I'm able to see that Christ, no matter what, loves these people. And, like, even though he doesn't agree with someone's lifestyle, he still wants them to be happy, you know? And so that's where I kind of started realizing, like, you know what, if this is about like rights down to like the basic fundamentals of rights, if I have the right to marry somebody who I love, somebody else should be able to marry whoever they love.
Right.
And I think that's just where my brain took that. It was like, okay, yeah, no, if it's just basic human rights, you should be able to love who you love. And I also support like the First Amendment right of like the LDS church, where they like don't allow same-sex partners to get married in like the temple, but that's their religious freedom, right? That's the practice of their religion, and I agree with that. But I don't think the church or any religious body or anybody should be able to be like, oh no, these two people can't get married because they're the same sex. I just don't think that's right.
Gotcha. So there's kind of a difference in like your religious versus like what normal people like in that religion would kind of
Ex-
yeah.
exactly. It's very much so like, I may not agree with it, but I have no right to tell you you can't do it.
Gotcha, gotcha.
And so if I truly believe in freedom, as I very much do, it's like, okay, no, they should have the freedom to do as they choose.
Mhm. No, I think that's a really cool perspective. Thank you for sharing that. I did want to shift a little bit to you mentioned you served an LDS mission.
Yeah.
Where did you serve?
Mexico, beautiful,
Okay,
beautiful country of Mexico.
really cool. What specific area were you in?
So it's on the Gulf Coast. It was in the state of Veracruz. The mission was called the Jalapa mission. So if you look at the state of Veracruz on the Gulf Coast, the entire northern half was my mission, and then a very small part of the state of Pueblo.
Okay, cool. Awesome. And you spoke Spanish down there?
Yeah, it was awesome. I loved
That's
every second
awesome.
of it, and I was really, really sad because I was supposed to come home in September of 2020, but COVID happened, and
Mm,
they sent home all the foreign missionaries early, and so I got sent home
yeah.
4 months early.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine. I had a lot of friends who were out and like just COVID kind of like messed up
Ruined the
everything. And
world. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
like it's crazy to think back that it was 5 years ago, but
Yeah,
just like it was so wild and so many people's lives were just so upended. Yeah, like what were
yeah.
your
It was
thoughts going into that experience?
Oh man, it was so rough because like in Mexico, it's like we kind of heard about this thing like the coronavirus in China. Oh, what's this? And I was like, oh, it's
Hmm.
probably nothing. It's probably like how when the swine flu was a thing or something like that. And then all of a sudden, places started like shutting down. Excuse me. And I was like, huh, it probably won't affect the missionaries. And then like the next week, our mission president was like, hey, everybody has to wear masks if you're going outside. And I was like, that doesn't make much sense to me. And then we did that for like a week, and then it was, hey, everybody go to your zone leader's apartment. You're going to be going down to the district, or not to the district, to the assistance houses later on this week, and all the foreign missionaries are going home. And
Wow.
that was within like a 10-day period of us even like starting to hear about it.
Wow.
And
That's
it was
really
rough.
stressful.
And then
Yeah.
the second we got home, I got home April 1st. And that
Okay.
was like a week after all of Utah completely locked down. I had to quarantine for 2 weeks. There was no church, there was no temple attendance until probably August or September when I was originally supposed to come home. And so, whereas like other missionaries who come home from their missions, they have all their friends to hang out with, they have all this stuff to like kind of like help them reintegrate back into society. I was completely alone. I was sitting
Mhm.
in my room and just so depressed. And it was so
Mhm.
hard.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's that's so crazy. And going from I mean, a mission experience is like you've got a companion with you 24/7. You
Yeah.
have people in your area and you're going out into the community and you're talking to people. And then to go from that to like absolutely no one has got
Yeah.
to be such a shift. Did that like change? You said you were depressed, but did that change like your like mental state and your religious state at all? Like,
Um, I wouldn't say, sorry, I had to clear my throat, but
you're fine.
I wouldn't say it like changed my religious views at all or anything
Hmm.
like that, or necessarily my mental state, but it was really hard on me. The biggest thing it probably did is it made me more unmotivated
Mm.
because for the longest time there was nothing really to do. I was home, I had no job, and I was like, well, if all these jobs are online, but they're all like computer jobs and stuff I don't know how to do. Like, how am I going to get a job and like all this other stuff? But
Hmm.
it ended up working out. So
That's good. Good. Did that whole experience of just kind of jumping back a little bit, being in Mexico, did that change your political views at all? Because that's a completely
um,
different environment than the United States.
it really is. It actually didn't. It actually made my views a little bit more conservative in a lot
Okay.
of ways. And actually, when you talk to a lot of people who actually live in Mexico that want to come to the United States, a lot of them really don't like people who cross the border illegally because it ruins it for the rest of them who want to go the right way, you know? And so immigration reform is one of those things where that I think definitely needs to happen. And being in Mexico definitely opened that up to me. Whereas like I don't agree with illegal border crossings. I don't think it should happen, but I think it should be easier for those people who are trying to seek asylum or trying to get a better life. There should be some way for them that's easier than it is right now, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it totally does. Were you seeing like any again, I'm trying to figure out how to how to phrase this question, but um when you got back from your mission, Southern Utah is a lot of immigrants as well, and a lot
Yeah.
of kind of diversity. Obviously, not as much as other places, but there's a
Uh,
large Hispanic community. Um, was that kind of a different outlook when you got back from your mission, having experienced like what that was like being in Mexico physically and then coming back home and I don't know, interacting with this group of
a
people at
little
all?
bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it was really nice actually. So growing up, the majority of my neighbors were Hispanic
Mm,
and from different parts of Central and South America. And so I already had a really good relationship with them. And so when I came back, it's almost like my relationship with them was amplified because I was now able to speak their language, you know, and
mm,
actually really get to know them on a more personal level. And I actually learned that several of our neighbors at the time were illegal immigrants, you know, and
mm,
I got to hear their stories about how when they were trying to come across the system at the time, like 30, 40 years ago, was so difficult for people to come across legally, that coming across illegally was the only thing that they had or could do to get here, you know? And so I definitely sympathize with a lot of people who feel that that's their only way to get to the US. And even like now with a lot of like the mass deportations going on and stuff like that, to a certain point, I support deporting violent criminals. I think that those people, gang members, MS-13, that they should be deported, especially if they're committing violent crimes. But when the deportations first started, there wasn't really a system to like measure who was a violent criminal and who was just an illegal immigrant, you know. And
mhm,
so families were getting separated, and a lot of people were really getting hurt. And it wasn't until weeks afterwards that a lot of people didn't even hear about it, but Trump passed an executive order to where people who had been in the United States, who had been working, who were actually like working on their residency, who weren't committing violent crimes and stuff like that, weren't going to get deported, and they were just going to focus on gang activity. And I was, in
Mhm.
my brain, it was always like, why did it take you a month to do that? Why didn't you just start with that? You know,
Right.
because you ruined so many people's lives already.
Mhm.
But
Right.
I think living in Mexico definitely opened up my eyes that there's a lot of people who feel that they don't have ways to get a better life, and that through illegal immigration is the only way. And so from there, I think that it helped me realize that immigration reform needs to happen.
Mhm. Right, right. Are you just with our current administration, you mentioned the Trump administration kind of
Yeah.
previously, but do you has your belief shifted at all with like Trump being reelected and some kind of new policies coming up with immigration specifically?
A little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So back in 2016 when I or I mean, I guess I couldn't vote in 2016, but in 2016 with Trump, when Trump got elected and through his presidency in 2016, at least for me personally, I saw a lot of really good things happen in the US, like the economy booming, a lot of jobs opening up and stuff like that, which is things I agree with, you know. And then through this term of the administration, I've seen a lot of good things happen that he's doing, but I've also seen a lot of really bad things that are going on. You know, like as I mentioned before with the immigration, with at the start of the mass deportations, he was deporting families, he was deporting families that had U.S. citizens in them, but because they were part of that family, they deport them too. You know, it's like those things. That's not okay. And I think it is important. A lot of people, I don't know if you've seen like my stories on Instagram lately and stuff like that. Like I've been I'll say like calling out Trump for different stuff, but it's not like I'm actually
Hmm.
calling out. He's never going to see my stories, but for like the whole fumbling of like the Epstein list and a bunch of other things that are going on right now in the administration that I don't agree with. And one thing that's important as like a military member too is we need to stay like neutral when you're in the military when it comes to the president of the United States. Like even when Biden was president, it was like I didn't agree and I didn't vote for him, but I hope he does a good job. You know, it's the same thing
Hmm.
for Trump. It's like where I voted for him and he's doing a lot of things that he said he would do, but now he's going back on a lot of things that he said he'd do as well. And it's like I think you should be able to criticize your politicians, especially the ones that you vote for. Otherwise, it's like you're essentially just a sheep, just a follower, you know, following
Right,
blindly.
right. Um, you said you have to be kind of careful being in the military. Have you had any constraints or any experiences where you wanted to say something, you wanted to speak out, but because of that label and that career path that you're on, that you've kind of held back a little bit?
Absolutely. Especially with the recent strikes in Iran and stuff like that done by the US. And
Hmm.
really all the foreign wars that we're kind of involved in right now. There is a lot where I wanted to really voice my opinion and be like, hey, we like I don't think we should be a part of this and stuff like that. But I have to be really careful when saying that because if I criticize President Trump like directly, then that looks really bad, not just on me, but on the Department of Defense and on the U.S. military and stuff. And so it's one of those things where I'm trying to like kind of navigate it and be like, well, I don't agree with this, but I hope everything works out. You know.
Hmm. Yeah. I wanted to dive into your military career a little bit. What made you decide to go down this career path?
So actually, for as long as I can remember, I've always wanted to be a soldier. It's kind of morbid, honestly, and I don't know if a lot of your followers are like this, but I originally joined the army because I wanted to kick in doors and shoot bad guys in the face. That was like my whole
Gotcha.
reasoning, which is a very toxic reasoning. I realize now as I've grown up a little bit. I'm like, you know, that's not all the military is, and there's a lot more to it. But the military itself has always I've always been drawn to it because it's always been something I viewed as like very masculine and very patriotic and stuff like that. And I've always wanted to serve my country, and I very much look up to warriors of the past, such as like the founding fathers and stuff like that. And so that's kind of what always drew me into it. And it's been fun. It's been really fun. I get to shoot things, blow stuff up, you know, but it's one of those things now as I'm realizing as an adult, like, yeah, it's really cool to like do this, but it takes a certain amount of dedication and a certain time away from your family that I'm not willing to put into it, and that's the reason why I'm choosing to get out.
Hmm, gotcha. So you're choosing you're gonna be leaving the military soon?
Yep. Yeah. So I leave the military in October of this year.
Okay, awesome. And what are you gonna do after that? Do you have a plan?
Yes. So I'm actually somewhat going through the hiring process at Las Vegas Fire and Rescue. I'm trying to be a firefighter.
Okay, very cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What was that always a goal of yours to be a firefighter, or was it just kind of like a
Um,
natural pipeline?
it kind of was always a goal. So my oldest brother was a firefighter paramedic for 13 years, and now he's a
Okay.
search and rescue paramedic down in Arizona. And so growing up with him, seeing him being a firefighter and stuff like that, I always looked up to him a lot. And then like my other brother, excuse me, my other brother, he was in law enforcement for a number of years, and I've always looked up to both of them being first responders and stuff. And one thing I've learned from them is that no matter what, they've always gone into their job with the idea of helping people. Um, and that's one thing that I've always liked. And so it's another reason why I joined the military, because in my brain at the time it was like, we're going to go overseas, we're going to fight wars, and I'm going to help these people be liberated. And then I'm like, here I've only gone to Korea where there's no war, and I've haven't really done anything with my military service. I haven't really helped anybody. And so I'm like, well, I want to do something that's actually worthwhile. And it was actually about a year ago, me and my wife were watching the TV show Fire Country and watching these inmates like practice to be firefighters and stuff like that. And
Mm.
it kind of just like reawakened that feeling of wanting to be a firefighter from when I was younger, watching my brother and stuff. I was like, I think that's something I could do after the military. And so I've started pursuing that. And as I've been pursuing it, it's been a lot of it has been kind of falling into my lap. So I don't know if people want to call it divine intervention or, like the spirit guiding me, but I definitely think that's where God's putting me.
That is really cool. I love that your brothers have done something similarly and you can kind of see that example. And it's very admirable to want to help people. And I just think that's so cool. So that's really
Yeah.
awesome.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, will you jumping back to the military just a little bit, will you kind
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
explain like what you have been doing in the military up until this point?
Yes. So I've been serving. So I'm in the infantry, which is the main fighting force of the Army. I've been serving up in Joint Base Lewis McChord, Washington. I've been there for the whole time for the past 4.5 years. And most of the time, honestly, all we really do is training. So we'll do like different platoon and squad, live fire shooting drills, and just like shooting targets and stuff like that. And then recently, we just got back from a rotational deployment to the Korean Peninsula. I was only there for 8 months. I left a month late because I had to get appendix surgery, but it was supposed to be a 9 month
Mhm.
rotation. Um, and that was really cool. That's mostly just like a show of force to deter the enemies of the United States, like China and Russia, North Korea, that would want to take areas of the Korean Peninsula, like South Korea, kind of deter them and let them know, like, hey, no, there's a fighting force here, kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Um, do you feel like the people in your group, I don't, is a troop, is that what it's called? I don't, your like
You can
specific group.
say platoon.
Your platoon. Do you feel like people in your platoon have similar beliefs politically, or are they kind of mixed, different?
So going into the military, my thought was everybody in the military is going to be like hyper conservative, super Republican, all this stuff,
Mm.
and that is the furthest thing from the truth. I've
Oh,
met I've met a number of soldiers who are transgender soldiers. I've met a number of soldiers who are LGBTQ soldiers. A number of my friends are either gay or lesbian or bi, and then it's such a diverse place, and you wouldn't necessarily think it is, but it's probably the most diverse work environment I've ever seen in my entire life.
wow, that's really cool. Has that shifted at all, like how you see, I don't know, the Defense Department of Defense or just the military in general?
In a way, yeah. I do think. Um, trying to think how I can word this without potentially getting in trouble. But I definitely think that the way the Department of Defense is going right now is a good direction. For a long
Okay.
time, especially under the Biden administration, their big focus was DEI and inclusivity, which as a fighting force is important. but it was already such a diverse job. It wasn't necessarily needed, in my opinion, to focus on that a whole lot. And it really took away from the whole aspect of what the Army's supposed to be, which is war fighters. So it got to a point where there was a lot of out of shape and overweight soldiers. There was a lot of people who would just straight up disrespect like seniors and stuff like that because they felt that they could. I've seen a number of times where it's funny. I've seen both sides. I've seen sides where there've been, soldiers of color who are told to do something and they're like, "Oh no, you just want me to do that because you're racist." When it's not racist, it's just a senior telling a lower enlisted soldier to do something. And then I've also seen on the other side where there's senior leaders who are actually blatantly racist towards soldiers. And
Mm,
so what's really the Army really is good though. So under the Biden administration, one thing they did really good was they created the SHARP program, which is the sexual harassment and assault program or whatever. And they did a really good job of holding people accountable for different equal opportunity complaints and sexual harassment and assault related complaints. And so we had a soldier actually in my platoon, one of my good friends. We were coming home. I was the designated driver of the night, and I brought some guys home from the bar. And my buddy was standing outside, and one of the guys I had drove home, he was brand new to our unit, and I didn't really know him that well. I was just kind of doing my duty of bringing him home, and he walked up to my buddy who is African American, and immediately started calling him the N word with a hard R and all these other slurs,
mm,
and it was like, okay, what's going on? And so, as what should have happened, a bunch of guys in my platoon kind of beat that guy up and were like, "Yo, you're not going to mess with our guy like that." And the guy who had been calling him the racial slurs was a senior leader. And so we
mm,
went and we took that and we used that as an EO complaint to our even more senior leader, the battalion commander. And he was all about it, and he reacted very well and very professional about it. And it got to the point where that soldier who had done those things to my buddy was reprimanded, and he lost rank, he lost pay, and was ultimately kicked out of the army. And so
wow.
one of the things I think they did really good, the DoD under the Biden administration, was the Not in My Army kind of initiative, which was very much cracking down on sexual harassment and assault and equal opportunity violations. But I do think where Pete Hegseth and the Trump administration is doing good right now is bringing back the war fighter and bringing back standards and discipline.
Mm. That's a really interesting perspective. I feel like military and Department of Defense, I feel like is always kind of a hot topic. And that's a
Yeah.
really unique perspective to have someone in it and like actually experiencing it. I had no idea it was so diverse. And you're
Oh,
right,
yeah.
the average person probably wouldn't see the military and say, "Oh yeah, that's a really diverse group." So that's a really unique perspective, and I'm glad you were able to share that. Um, do you feel like there's been a huge shift between the Biden administration and the Trump administration, military-wise? I'm
Yeah.
just, like, very uninformed about what goes on
Mhm.
in the military, and I feel like a lot of people probably are as well, so
Yeah, no, you're good. I would definitely say yes. I'd say the biggest shift is going away from, whereas a lot of the Biden administration was like mostly solely focusing on the like sharp and EO and DEI and stuff like that. Whereas now the Trump administration is like, yes, those things are bad, and we're still going to punish people who violate those things, but that's not going to be our main focus right now. Our main focus is going to be bringing back soldiers and bringing back discipline and standards and stuff like that. And a lot of soldiers who, for a long time, have, I guess the way to word it is like running rampant without standards and discipline.
mm,
Now they're having a really hard time because it's the Army's coming back to, no, we're a war fighting force. Like, we're going to be hard on you. We're going to yell at you. We're going to do things that the Army does. And I think it's a direction that the Army definitely needs to go.
gotcha. I wanted to shift unless there's anything else you wanna talk about with the military, but I wanted to
No,
shift
you're
to a different
good.
topic. Okay, I wanted to ask, so you're a father, you're a husband, and your wife is gonna have her baby this week. That's so exciting. Very
Yes.
excited for you. That's awesome. Has becoming a husband and then subsequently a father changed how you view the world at all, politically, religiously?
Um, no, I don't think it has. My wife is also very conservative,
Mm,
um, and I think the only difference it really has is it's helped me understand like different struggles of people of color. Because my wife is Hawaiian Samoan. She's
mm.
I don't know, she's cousins to like the Aquins and all them.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so she's told me of times where she's been profiled by like police officers and different stuff like that, you know.
Mm,
And so it's opened my eyes up that way. But for the most part, it's really rooted in me, my beliefs of being, you know, like the male gender roles, like the provider, the protector, and things like that, because I want to provide for my wife and my kids. I want to protect my wife and my kids, you know. And it's like, it's it's very important to me, not necessarily gender roles, but that a man be able to provide for his family, you know.
mm.
And I think gender roles are important, but not so rigid, if that makes sense. I think gender roles can
Yeah.
be a lot more fluid, but they are very important.
Hmm. Did your wife grow up in the islands, or did she grow up in Utah or the mainland or where?
She grew up here. She grew up here in Southern Utah.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. So that's maybe where that conservative viewpoint
Yeah.
came from. Yeah. Does she clash at all with, and this is probably getting too much into her story rather than your story, but does she clash, or do you guys clash at all with like her family? Do they kind of believe the same things or
Her family is mostly pretty conservative, and that's one thing I've
okay.
also experienced too. Is a lot of Pacific Islanders that I've had the opportunity to interact with. A lot of them actually are a lot more conservative than people would realize.
Hmm. That's yeah, that's really interesting. Um, okay, so I wanted to shift into more like specific political beliefs, and I
Hmm.
wanted to ask if you're comfortable sharing. And you said you're conservative already. Do you align specifically with the Republican Party, or do you see yourself more like in the middle of the spectrum, on the political spectrum?
I would say in the middle. I would say I'm a libertarian independent, but I lean more conservative.
Okay, okay, cool. Do you feel like that specific label, libertarian, conservative, do you feel like that has an impact on your life at all?
Um, I think it kind of does in a way where I've experienced, if I like tell, for example, like people in my life who are like very much Republican or very much Democrat, if I let them know, like, oh, yeah, I'm a libertarian, they're like, I've been told, like, oh, so your votes don't matter, kind of a thing, you know, things
Mm,
like that. It's like, no, my votes do matter. Like, just because I'm a libertarian doesn't mean I can't vote for one political party or the other, you know? And it's like,
right.
I've tried to tell people, like, you shouldn't vote for someone just based off of their political party. I think that's ridiculous, you know? But, you know, other than that, I think it's been pretty chill.
Because of this specific identity, libertarian, and because of all the experiences we've talked about today, and then obviously there's so many more that go into making someone's political beliefs. But I wanted to ask, what are the things that you are the most passionate about today?
I'd say the things I'm most passionate about today is probably it'd be equal rights for everybody who
Okay.
is who is in the US as a resident or a citizen, um, whether that be LGBTQ rights or like transgender rights or things like that, you know.
Mhm.
But I'm also, I think, very much one of the biggest things is protecting children. I think there's a lot of things that, from what I view on at least the left side, there's a lot of things that are pushed in schools and in libraries and things towards children that I just don't necessarily agree that should be pushed towards children, you know? And that's like true on the right as well. You know, there's a lot of things that the right pushes towards children where you're like, calm down, they're just kids. They don't need to be buying crypto at 3 years old, you know? But I'd say equal rights, protecting children, and probably I think gun rights is a very, very big one for me.
Okay.
Um, I'm a very big history buff um, when it comes to like U.S. history and stuff like that. I absolutely love it. I love the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, and all that stuff. And so with gun rights, um, being like having our gun rights as the founding fathers intended, which is, you know, like shall not be infringed, essentially, and a lot of people, I'd say probably out of all my beliefs, my gun rights beliefs are probably the most extreme that I have.
Mm.
Um, and they're not for everybody, which like I acknowledge that. And I understand why a lot of people do want like gun laws and gun control and things like that. And I sympathize a lot with those people, especially victims of like school shootings and mass shootings and homicides and things like that. But I'm also of the belief that if a society is going to be a free society, especially when it comes to guns and things like that, when you're actually going to preserve your personal freedoms, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to happen that are going to suck, you know. And that's like the same with, for example, the First Amendment, like freedom of speech, like one of arguably the most important amendment, and the right we have. But there's a lot of things that people do to exercise their First Amendment right that I don't agree with, like burning the flag and things like that. Like for me personally, I don't agree with that, but that's their First Amendment right, and I have to
Mhm.
acknowledge that, like, you know what, if people are going to actually have this right, I'm going to be offended sometimes.
Mhm. Well, it's kind of going back to like your beliefs, like the LGBTQ community, and like just allowing that, like you have your own personal beliefs, but you're also allowing others to kind of do what they want because it
Exactly.
is like a free society, right?
Exactly, 100%.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think that's where a lot of libertarians view it as well. I feel like
Hmm.
a lot of super hardcore Republicans and super hardcore Democrats are too focused on what's happening on the other person's side. Whereas I feel like a lot of libertarians and a lot of people who really are in the middle are able to see, like, no, we need to be like a completely free society. And that means that both sides at times are right and both sides at times are super wrong.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Was it hard for you? I'm curious to decide that you were libertarian over Republican or Democrat because I feel like, I mean, those are the two big camps, right? Is Democrat or
Yeah.
Republican? Like, was that kind of a hard shift for you, or did you just kind of naturally fall into that category?
I think kind of naturally fell into that category when I started actually like talking to people, especially like outside of Utah, because as we know, Utah definitely has its bubble
Hmm.
compared to the rest of the United States. And so moving outside of Utah and actually like interacting with people that weren't like super hardcore members of the church, or like the members of the church that are like, oh yeah, I'm super Mormon, but then are like also super judgy and stuff like that. Because that happens a lot in Utah. I think interacting with more people and more of society kind of helped me fall into that position naturally.
Gotcha. No, that's really cool. I'm all for people choosing. I mean, Democrats and Republicans, you can choose whatever you want, but I'm all for people like finding alternative routes and because there are parties where you can really get down into what you believe. And
Absolutely.
so yeah, yeah, I think that's really cool that you found that group and you found kind of a community that works with your beliefs. I think that's really cool.
Thank you.
Um, I wanted to shift just to some final thoughts. What do you hope that people take away from this interview?
I hope that people take away from this interview that people can have views on both sides. Like I think it's so important to be able to understand the other person's side as well, because I mean that's also where a lot of my mind was changed too. Like even like I used to be an avid watcher of like Charlie Kirk and who's that other guy, like the Change My Mind guy, I can't think of his name right now.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, I can't remember.
Yeah, but he like goes to college campuses and he's like, oh, this is this change my mind. And
Right, right.
like for the most part I agree with a lot of things that he says, but like it's cool to hear other people's sides because then I can understand and like empathize with them and be like, okay, no, like I can see why that's important to them. Like the
Hmm.
whole like LGBTQ rights and transgender rights and stuff like that. Like I think it's like super important for people to be able to be who they are. If they feel they are a certain way, who am I to say that they can't do that? I think they should be able to be who they want to be. Um, and so I think it's so important to see that you can you can disagree with people, but you can still treat people with love and respect and kindness, and understand that they had different backgrounds, different upbringings than you. But ultimately, I think what's most important is to just love everybody.
Hmm.
Just be
Yeah,
kind and show love to everyone.
I love that. Treat people like people. That's so good.
Exactly.
I might quote that like from now on because I think that's
That
so
is
good.
that is all right.
So cool. My final question for you is what do you wish that people better understood about you and others who see the world similarly?
I would say I wish people would see that, especially conservatives, they come from a way of they're wanting to preserve a lot of their heritage. Whereas like heritage, I feel like is very, very important to a lot of conservatives. And I think preserving those aspects should be equally as important as people's beliefs to progress society. I think there's a lot of progressives who have also equally as important views. Um, and it's like one of those things as well. Like as a libertarian, I definitely think it is very, very important to preserve heritage, but I definitely think that society should progress as well. You know, and
Right.
so I think I hope people can see that conservatives oftentimes are misunderstood in a lot of ways. And I realize that a lot of conservatives nowadays are of the older generation, and a lot of them don't necessarily know how to voice their beliefs in a way where everybody can understand. And it comes off as rude or judgy or racist or misleading. And
Mhm.
so that's one thing I just hope people can see that at the very base of it, I think everybody just wants to be happy and wants to be treated with kindness.
Mhm. Yeah, I would absolutely agree. Thank you so much for those thoughts. Is there any parting thoughts that you have before we wrap up?
Um, let's see. I guess just like love everyone. It's like especially like for being a member of the church. It's one of those things. It's like Jesus said, "Love everyone, treat them kindly too." And I think that's so 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 important. And I just hope that our world in the direction that it's going right now, people can start to unite more and not be so divided.
Mhm. That's perfect. I love that so much. Perfect way to end a podcast.
No problem.
Um, yeah, well, thank you so much, Riley. I really appreciate it. I'm so excited for people to listen to this and to get to know you. And yeah, I just appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing your thoughts with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad I came on. I hope people don't hate my views too much.
No, I mean, that's the point of the podcast, right? Is to just kind of
Exactly.
open minded. So, yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much.